In this lesson, we're going to expand on what we did in the previous lesson. So we're still going to be using the distributive property, and we're still going to be combining like terms. It's just the problems are going to get a little bit more complicated. All right, so let's do it. I have a -5 out front of parentheses. And in this class, when you see a number next to parentheses, the parentheses are going to do two things. They're going to group the terms that are inside, but they also imply multiplication. So you might see me even write sometimes something like 2 times 3 times 5, right? That means that they would all be multiplied together. So since this -5 is outside the parentheses and there's no symbol in between, it's being multiplied. The only way we can multiply this is to distribute. So let's do it. Just a reminder, when the signs are the same, right, the answer is positive. And this is for multiplication and division. When the signs are different, the answer is negative. All right, again, just for multiplication and division. All right, so let's do it. So I'm going to distribute this -5. So -5 times b, it's a negative times a positive, so it's -5b. And then -5 times -7, negative times a negative is a positive, so it's plus 35. That's it. That's all I can do here. That's my final answer. I can't combine these because they're not like terms. One has a variable, the other one is a constant. All right. Let's ramp it up a little. So I'm going to, I have the 2 out front of the parentheses, so I have to distribute. 2 times -1.7b is -3.4b. 2 times -3.4 is -6.8. Now remember what we did in the last lesson. We have a minus in front of the parentheses. So we're going to write in our 1 and we're going to distribute a -1. So -1 times 2b is -2b, and -1 times 0.4 or 4/10 is -0.4. Now we've got a lot of subtraction happening here, but remember, we can rewrite this whole thing as addition. So that's what I'm going to do next. I've got -3.4b plus a -6.8 plus a -2b plus a -0.4. Now I'm going to rewrite my expression using the commutative property. I'm going to move the terms so that the like terms are next to each other. So I've got this b term and this b term. So I'm going to put those next to each other. -3.4b and a -2b. And then I've got this constant and this constant, so I'm going to put them next to each other. So I've got a -6.8 and a -0.4. All right, so now time to do some addition. I'm going to add these two like terms together. They're both negative, which means they're on the same team. So we just have more players on the team, right? So 3.4 players on the negative team plus another 2 players on the negative team gives us -5.4, right? 5.4 players on the negative team. And then over here, kind of the same thing, right? I've got -6.8 on the, I've got 6.8 on the negative team, 0.4 on the negative team. So I combine them and I get -7.2. Did I do my addition right, you guys? Another way that I can write that, because adding a negative is the same as subtracting, I could also write it like this. These are both correct. Just depends on what form we want our answer in. All right, got 2 more for you. Let's do some fraction multiplication. All right, so I just want to remind you, when we multiply a fraction by a whole number or a non-decimal part number, we only multiply the top because, let me show you an example. If I had to do 1/4, let's say, times 5, right? That's the same thing as 1/4 times 5/1, right? So because that whole number is going to be written as a fraction by putting it over 1, we end up just multiplying the top number, and then the bottom number is just multiplied by 1, so there's no change, right? So I'm going to do that over here. Since we're going to have to distribute this 1/3, I'm going to write this as over 1 and over 1, right? Okay, so let's distribute. So 1/3 times 2/1. Remember, top times top, bottom times bottom. So 1 times 2 is 2 on top, 3 times 1 is 3 on the bottom, and then I have my x because there was an x with the 2 to begin with. All right, now I'm going to multiply, because remember, when you multiply and divide, you don't have to have like terms. So let me explain why. If I have 2 chairs and 3 tables, I can't add them together and say I have 5 chair tables, right? I can't put them together. They're different objects. But if I have 2 tables and my friend has 2 tables and then another person has 2 tables, I can say I've got 3 times 2 tables, which would be 6 tables. So we don't need like terms when we multiply or divide. We do need them when we add. All right, so I multiplied here. So now I'm going to do 1/3 times 12/1. Well, 1/3 times 12/1 is going to give me 12/3, which is just 4. So I'm going to write 4. Now, I'm not going to write the parentheses because I already did the distribution, right? So now I'm going to subtract from that. I'm just copying 14/15 x. I'm going to rewrite this whole thing as addition, just like I've done in all the other problems. And I'm going to move my like terms next to each other, just like I did in all the other problems. So I have an x term up front and an x term in the back, so I'm going to put those together. 2/3 x and a negative 14/15 x plus 4. Okay, now to add fractions, here's another little rule, right? To add fractions, we have to have a common denominator. So you want to look at 3 and 15 and think, what can they both go into? Well, an easy way to find a common denominator is just to multiply them. 3 times 15 is 45. But that won't give you the least common denominator. And it's nice to have the least common denominator because, I mean, small numbers, right? So I know that 15 goes into 15 one time, and 3 goes into 15. So I'm going to rewrite 2/3. I'll do it over here to the side with a denominator of 15. So to do that, I would have to multiply the bottom by 5, which means I have to multiply the top by 5. So it's going to become 10/15. So now I've got 10/15 x, and I've got a negative 14/15 x plus 4. All right, so close. Now we just have to add these two rational terms together. So we're only looking at the top, right? Because when we add or subtract fractions, we just keep the denominator the same. So if I've got 10 on the positive team and 14 on the negative team wins by 4, right? So this is going to be negative 4/15 x. And then I just have this plus 4 hanging out because I have nothing to combine it with. So it just stays like that. All right, one more. Let's keep going with those fractions. Might as well, right? Okay. Here we go. So nothing is being distributed in front of the first set of parentheses, so I'm just going to copy it. So it's negative. Oh, and you know what, you guys? Since we are adding and subtracting with these fractions and mixed numbers, I am going to write all of my mixed numbers as fractions. Are we good with that? So starting with 2 1/3, I'm going to multiply and add, right? So that's 6. 2 times 3 is 6, plus 1 is 7. So I'm going to rewrite this as negative 7/3. I'm going to keep the 4/5. And now in the second set of parentheses, I've got to write in that negative 1, right? Write in the 1, and I have to distribute. So negative 1 times 1 5/6 would make it negative times a positive. So it's going to be negative, but I'm going to write it as an improper fraction. So 6 times 1 plus 5 gives me 11/6. And like we said, it's going to be negative 11/6 because I multiplied it by negative 1. Then when I distribute the negative 1 to 9/10, I get negative 9/10. All right, now we're getting somewhere. So I'm going to rewrite this whole thing as addition. So I've got negative 7/3 d plus 4/5 plus negative 11/6 d plus negative 9/10. All right, now I'm going to rearrange so that like terms are next to each other. So I'm going to do my d terms first. I've got negative 7/3 d and a negative 11/6 d. And then I've got the constant terms, right? The ones that don't have a variable. So that's 4/5 and negative 9/10. All right, getting closer. We need common denominators, right? If I need to add these two d terms together, one has a denominator of 3, the other one has a denominator of 6. I need them to have a common denominator. 6 would be the least common denominator here because they both go into 6. So if I multiply the first fraction, the top and bottom, by 2, this becomes a 14, and this becomes a 6, right? So I have negative 14/6 d. I'm just going to rewrite it like that. Negative 14/6, right? I doubled the top and bottom so that they have a common denominator. I'm going to come over here with the 4/5 and negative 9/10 and do the same thing. My least common denominator here would be 10, which means I've got to double this and double this. So that's going to give me 8/10. So let me rewrite that one. Try to get everything in my, yeah. All right, so 8/10 there. And now I can add. So over here, remember, we're just looking at the top number, right? We're keeping the denominator the same. So I've got 14 on the negative team, another 11 on the negative team, put them together, and I've got 25 on the negative team. And then I'm going to come over here and do the same thing. I've got 8 on the positive team and 9 on the negative team. So they're on opposing teams, which means game on. And the negative team is going to win by 1. So I would have negative 1/10. Now remember, I can also write that as negative 25/6d plus negative 1/10, right? And I can go back and convert the 25/6 back into a mixed number. So 6 goes into 25 4 times. I'm going to write it up here so it doesn't get so crowded. So 6 into 25 goes 4 times with 1 left over. So I could also write it like that, right? It just depends on what the instructions are and how the answer choices are written, if it's multiple choice. All right, so if there's anything that I said or showed or did in this video and you were like scratching your head like, what? I don't get that. Pause it, take a picture, text it to me, and I can answer your question. I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye.